Shaquille O'Neal was one of the most electrifying NBA players to ever play, and probably the best center ever. He could dunk on anyone, he could guard anyone, and honestly wasn't a bad passer. But he was terrible at the free throw. If you foul him, you make him shoot, you've got a chance at winning the game. He had terrible form and terrible results, only 52% from the line. But there was another big man who also had trouble from the line until he got some simple advice. Just go with the flow. Go with the path of least resistance. Shoot the granny shot between the legs. Look goofy. And that's what Rick Barry did. And he was 90% from the line. Sometimes you got to look goofy. Sometimes you got to go with the flow to get the best results. And that is what we're talking about today. Tom Lee's new Granny Shots ETF is trying to do what Rick Barry did with the free throw. Just go with the flow. Look at macro trends, what's happening around the world, and pick the stocks that fit those macro trends. Could this be the ETF that replaces our stockbroker? Let's find out. Welcome to 15 Minute Money, the show where I search the financial world for the most up-to-date investment ideas, market trends, and income streams so you don't have to. Let's get into it. I've always been obsessed with investing, from a young age up until the point when I wrote the book, The Quick Start Guide to Investing. But since selling my house and quitting my job, moving my family across the world to Spain, I've been consistently trying to find new investment ideas to either day trade, for my weekly options trades, or for longer term investing. Looking all over the internet, you get a little fatigued trying to find the right balance between the next hot idea and good sound fundamental investments. Well, in today's video, I think I found what we're looking for. I'm going to go over this investment that I think hits both of those categories. Obviously, we're talking about Tom Lee's ETF Granny Shots. And I'm going to go over my research that I've been doing for my own decisions. Again, this isn't financial advice. If you need a financial advisor, go get one. This is an educational channel of what I'm finding out to keep me from going back to my 9 to 5. And I've been doing a deep dive into Tom Lee's Granny ETF. So stick around and I'll share my research and then I'll let you know if Granny's made it into my portfolio. But quick, a little information on Tom Lee. In his extensive career, he's been doing this for nearly 30 years. He's a highly accomplished Wall Street strategist. He joined JP Morgan in 1999, where for 15 years, he was the chief equity strategist. In 2014, he left JP Morgan and co-founded Fundstrat Global Advisors. Tom does evidence-based research. It's an investment strategy often described as contrarian. He's become widely recognized as one of Wall Street's most influential voices and authorities on digital assets and stocks. So yeah, Tom, he's a smart guy. Let's find out if his smarts are going to work in the Granny ETF. So the Fundstrat Granny Shots US Large Cap ETF, known as Granny, is overseen by Tom himself, who is the Chief Investment Officer and Portfolio Manager. The fund's asset base has grown rapidly, $3 billion in under 1 year. It's pretty impressive. If you don't know, look it up. It's one of the fastest growing ETFs on the market. The core strategy, known as the Granny Shots, obviously, is a thematic research-driven approach. It seeks to own the highest quality stocks within the S&P 500, typically between 20 and 50 securities. You know what? I could talk, but let's hear Tom on a recent interview what he says about Granny Shots.
These are stocks that you think are like layups, basically. A Granny Shot, like shooting a free throw underhanded, like Rick Barry.
Yeah, and you
Okay.
want to own it. You're not trading them.
Yeah.
So we're trying to find essentially what's equivalent of like your idea of permanent stocks. But we do rotate it. But the reason we sort of have this idea is we have themes that like span multiple decades. Cybersecurity, millennials, AI, Fed cycles.
Okay, so your idea is that these are stocks that are enduring. The story behind them is bigger than the stock itself.
Yeah, they're linked to generational ideas.
Okay, I love that idea.
There's Tom talking about the basics of Granny Shots. They're linked to generational ideas, funds and stocks that you want to hold for a long time. So the Fundstrat Granny Shots US Large Cap, again, long name, but let's just talk about Granny. It's got these 3 principles. It seeks to identify the most important themes driving the economy in the US market. It aims to select the best stocks benefiting from the tailwinds of those themes, and this leads to a concentrated portfolio of large cap equities driven by significant market forces. So why Fundstrat's Granny Shots? He's got these 5 different reasons, and I love the footnotes up here. You get the focus on the long term, which obviously that's good. The consensus is usually wrong. Like it's a little braggadocious maybe, but what they say is Fundstrat Capital relies on their own evidence, not the collective view of others. Basically, they're not going to get caught in groupthink. Every time the market drops a little bit, people are freaking out. And this is going to be a recovery. It's going to be a V-shaped recovery. And here's the reasons why. Number 3 has got demographics are destiny, aka thematic investing is key. 4, markets have an age bias, where he's going to be talking about the millennials trade. And then 5, don't fight the Fed. The key requirement for inclusion into any stock is that it has to be anchored to at least 2 thematic arcs that we're going to talk about that Fundstrat believes will grow over the next 5 to 10 years. Let's listen to Tom again talk about that.
And we only add a stock that appears in more than one theme. So you want to say like, hey, these are the stocks most linked to cybersecurity, but let's say that's 50 stocks. But then we want to say, is it linked to any of the other 6 themes? So it has to be appearing at least 2 themes, because then we figured there's 2 legs to support why the stock
So
will
if
always
one
work.
story goes away, it's on there for a reason.
Yeah, it's anchored. Yeah.
Okay.
Does that mean that you wouldn't own a stock like CrowdStrike, which is like purely in one theme?
Well, CrowdStrike is actually a granny shot.
AI and cybersecurity.
Yes, that's right.
Oh,
Yeah.
you're good, Josh.
Yeah.
There, Tom was talking about these themes and how a stock only makes it in the portfolio if it's in 2 of the themes. So let's look at these 7 different themes. He's got 3 shorter term themes and then the 4 longer term themes, which is over 3 to 5 years. So short term theme number 1, you've got style tilt. Then you've got seasonality. Then you have PMI recovery. And then the 4 longer themes, you've got energy / cybersecurity, millennials, whoop, whoop, global, and I'm an old millennial, global labor suppliers, and then easing financial conditions. So let's look at this. There are what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stocks inside GRNY that hit 4 of the 7 themes. You got Google, you got Meta, you got Microsoft, you got Palantir, and you got Garmin. Garmin, interesting. And then you get the 3 themes. You've got Apple, Netflix, and a bunch of these other ones. And then you got a lot that fit 2 themes on their own. So let's take a second and let's actually look at each theme. Let's break it down and get into the mind of Tom Lee, the wizard. Number 1 for the granny shots is style tilt. And style tilts, you can see here, it says, sometimes referred to as portfolio tilts. It represents a portfolio's exposure to various factors that may allow investors to achieve higher than expected return. Historically, you've got examples like shift in interest rate expectations may cause one factor to outperform the other. And then GRNY attempts to capture these regime shifts over time by adjusting to the style tilt, and they do this on a quarterly basis. You've got the holdings with style tilt, AMD, Argo, Costco, CrowdStrike. You can see what's in here. In this theme, you got 32 stocks fit the theme, 24 actually made it into granny shots. Theme number 2 is seasonality. Historically, certain industries or groups of stocks may exhibit reoccurring patterns of performance during specific time periods. Granny shots is trying to capture this seasonality because some stocks do better at certain times than others. You've got defensive times, you've got growth times. GRNY evaluates its seasonal exposure to industry groups, and then looks at this quarterly and uses proprietary models to analyze historical win ratios. Seasonality, you could have had 32 theme stocks in that theme. Only 10 made it in a granny. You can take a look at them. You get Apple, you get CrowdStrike, you got Microsoft, you got Netflix, you got Oracle, and so on and so forth. Theme number 3 is Purchasing Managers Index, also known as PMI. And PMI comes out, I think, every single month. The number is released, and it makes the stock market go haywire for a couple seconds, and people try to make a bunch of money. Day trade in it, it's a little risky, but it gives you basically an insight into the mind of the suppliers and the manufacturers. So guys and gals, these managers take the survey and they release the information every month. And that is known as the PMI index. And Fundstrat is trying to capitalize on the relationship between yield curve dynamics and PMI. And that implies that yield curve has bottomed and seeks to gain exposure to companies benefiting from the forecasted recovery. Holdings in this theme, you could have had 37. They only chose 9. I will say the interesting thing about Fundstrat and the granny shots is like, it's not just the Mag 7, right? It's not just super tech. You have a lot of different interesting types of companies inside this ETF. So you've got JP Morgan and Nvidia. You've got JEV and S&P Global. Like, it's a pretty interesting mix. But we're not here to talk about the mix right now. Let's get into theme number 4. Theme number 4 is energy and cybersecurity. You had 50 possible options to choose from, and only 6 made it into the Granny Shot ETF. So you've got some interesting holdings: VST, ANET, CrowdStrike, GEV, Palo Alto Networks, and Palantir. I think this slide's pretty interesting. You've got cyber threats are on a parabolic rise. You have a focused shift from preventative to actively managing cybersecurity threats. And then it's moved more so onto the cloud. So the Fundstrat team is trying to capitalize on the high production. I mean, look at this parabolic rise of malware attacks. Like, cybersecurity is not going anywhere. It's going to be a theme for a long term, and they're trying to make money as much as possible on that theme. Number 5 is millennials. Obviously, millennials is going to be a big theme. Like, we are the next come up generation. Sorry, Gen X, you've already had your time. But millennials are going to make a huge portion of financial decisions. We're going to be inheriting lots of wealth pretty soon. And there's a lot of things that hit within the millennial mindset. You have 38 possible stocks, 15 million in the granny stocks, and they're not necessarily 15 that you might have thought about. You've got Apple, Amazon, Robinhood, JP Morgan, Facebook, Microsoft, Google, Garmin, NVIDIA, and Tesla. And if you look at why Tom Lee is focusing on the millennial generation, because they're going to be controlling the largest share of disposable income at the year 2029. Basically, we are coming into spending. We are going to be driving all the spending. We're going to be coming into the peak earning years. If you haven't quit your job and retired early and moved to Spain, you as a millennial are going to be a driving force. And Fundstrat recognizes this, and they're following millennials. They're following millennial spending patterns. And they're trying to capitalize and make money off of how we spend. The next theme is global labor shortage. I think unless you've been under a rock, you probably know that people are making less babies because babies are very expensive. I've got 2 of them. I know what I'm talking about. And because of less babies being brought into the world, there's less people driving labor. And if a lot of macroeconomists believe that it's actually growth of a population in terms of like real humans are what turns into gross domestic product, GDP. So it's very possible that nations all around the world, the GDP is going to be shrinking as less and less humans are being born. The one thing that might hook this up is AI, especially if you've got robotics. We're still a few years off from that. So the global labor shortage is a big theme. Granny Shots is taking advantage of that. Down here on the right, you've got technology will likely become 50% of the S&P 500 by the year 2045. Huge piece, because as we're not making enough humans, something's going to have to fill in that labor gap, and Tom thinks it's going to be tech-driven. And then last but not least, you've got easing financial conditions. As the macroeconomic conditions allow the Fed to take a dovish stance, which means that they're going to be cutting rates, and financial conditions ease, certain industries and companies are positioned to benefit, and he thinks that these 11 stocks that made it into it are going to be benefiting the most. So those are the 7 themes that Granny Shots is built on. Now let's get back to Compound and Friends as they asked Tom a few more questions that I think we would want answered.
How many holdings?
There's 35 stocks.
Is that static? It will always be 35?
It's not a predetermined number, but has always ended up averaging around 35.
How close are you trying to get the initial position weighting to the other weightings? Are we trying to equal weight or
yes,
not?
it's quarterly rebalanced to equal weight.
Okay.
And it would have done better, as you would know, if we never rebalanced, because NVIDIA has been part of the Granny Shots list since 2019.
But that's what you're telling people. I'm rebound. In hindsight, would you have done a semi-annual rather than a quarterly? Because you're going to throttle the best stocks, but
Yes,
you're
it
also
does
going to
throttle.
reduce volatility. So it's kind of a double-edged sword by rebalancing that frequently.
So interesting for me to actually invest in something like this, because it's a 0.75% management fee. And I'm, kind of against management fees. I typically invest in either single stocks or ETFs in general. But to spend 0.75%, I think I need to actually see that I'm getting that return. And I think Granny Shots is going to get that return. Look at this. It's currently trading at $26.15. Year to date is up 31%. Looking at SPY, year to date, 16.76. So for the most part, I think people should be investing on their own, and they should be looking at cheap fees if you're going to be into ETFs, unless it has a really good manager, which I think Tom is. I like what I'm seeing. I think that Tom's got a good head on his shoulders, and I'm going to trust them with 5% of my portfolio, even with the 0.75% fee, which I normally wouldn't love to do. But if this guy can beat the S&P by 10% every year, it's definitely worth the money in that case. That's going to be it for today's show. Thanks for joining me. What do you guys think about Tom? What do you guys think about Tom Lee's new fund, Granny Shots? I'm obviously a big believer in Tom. I've got his other company, BMNR, which I really need Ethereum to get off its butt and have a great end of the year. But write in the comments below. Tell me what you guys think. Are you going to be investing into granny shots? Are you already invested in granny shots? Or do you think Tom is just a perma bull, and when the bear market comes, he's going to be eating a huge bag, and I will be reviewing this video in a year or two saying it was a really bad decision? What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Always hit that thumbs up if you can. Give me a like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you next week on 15 Minute Money. Thanks for joining me today on 15 Minute Money, the show where I search the financial world for the most up-to-date investment ideas, market trends, and income streams so you don't have to. I'm your host, Nick Bradley. We'll see you next week.